Black and white is one of the best ways to experience film photography. It's cheaper, there are more options available, and it's way easier to develop at home. But black and white photography is a completely different language from color. So images that would work perfectly well in color simply just look cluttered and boring in black and white. And this is one of the problems that many new photographers are facing. So today I'm going to show you my top 5 tips for taking better images in black and white. Tip number 1 is to simplify your composition. In black and white photography, there's no color that's going to pop off the image and tell the viewer where to look. So you have to do that by simplifying the composition, and there's a number of techniques that you can use to do this. One of the main techniques that people use is focus blur, which just blurs out the background and reduces the amount of objects that are visible in the frame. Another way you can do that is by getting closer to your subject so that there's fewer distractions on the edges of the frame, or you can use vignetting, which is darkening the corners of the frame so that all the attention is focused into the center of the image. One cool way to find better black and white compositions is to actually go out and look at night. At nighttime, humans can't see color, so you're not going to be distracted by any of the colors in the scene. Instead, you're just going to be seeing the composition, so it'll be much easier to go out and find images that might not pop during the daytime. In the cities, you're going to have way different lighting that could lend itself to some amazing nighttime photos. Now, tip number 2 is don't take photos of the sunset, but take photos during the sunset and sunrise. We've all had black and white film in our camera during an epic sunset only to come away with boring photos. But during the sunset and sunrise is when you get the best directional light that lights up your subject and darkens the background with long, harsh shadows. And that allows you to separate the subject from the background and direct the viewer's attention right where you want it. Now, some photos are going to look better at sunrise than they will at sunset, and that's just because of the direction of the sun at that time. And you can find out if that's going to be the case by looking at free services like suncalc.org, which will show you the direction of the sun every day of the year, no matter where you are on Earth. This is a free tool that I use all the time. I'll link it down in the description below so that you can see it yourself. And tip number 3 is to brighten your subject and darken your background. This is another way to isolate the subject from the background and to simplify your composition, because the viewer's attention is naturally going to gravitate towards the brightest part of the image. So by darkening all of the distractions, now you bring in their attention right where you want it. And this is actually going to help attract people's attention from across the room if you're in a gallery or if it's on a wall or something like that. An image that has a clearly defined bright subject is going to attract attention from afar, and it's going to keep it there. Now, you can do this in Lightroom or in the darkroom using dodge and burn, or you can do this in camera by using a flash or using directional light from the sunset or sunrise. No matter how you do it, it's going to make for a better image. If you are doing it in the camera, you're going to want to meter for the highlights. And now that's a bit controversial. Not every film photographer is going to tell you to do that, but I think it's a really important tip, especially for black and white, because it helps increase the contrast in the image. And it helps direct the viewer's attention right where you want it. Now you can always bracket. You could always do another image where you meter for the shadows, which is going to give you a more even exposure that you're going to have more of a chance to work with in the darkroom. It's important to note that there's no such thing as an unedited image. Even if you're doing this in Lightroom, or if you're doing it in camera, or even just choosing the right developer for your situation, you're going to be editing the image in some way. Great photographers like Ansel Adams edited every single image in the darkroom, probably more than you're used to doing in Lightroom. And that's just because back in the day, it wasn't seen as a problem to be editing your images. It was seen as part of the artistic process. Now today, I think that's really important to tell people, that you will be editing your images no matter what, and that it's important to make your images as good as they possibly can be. Tip number 4 is to use long exposures. Black and white photography loves long exposures because it really helps simplify the composition by blurring out moving parts of the image, such as water or people in a heavily trafficked area. And what that does is it creates negative space, which is a blurry part of the image that a viewer cannot focus on, and instead it directs their attention towards the sharp details, such as the rocks surrounding the water or the buildings inside that square. This is a really powerful technique that photographers have been using for a long time because it really helps your subject stand out. When you see photos of the ocean or a waterfall, quite often the details in the rippling water can become distractions in the image, where when you soften that by doing a long exposure, it really helps bring attention to your subject. The best way to do this is to go out at a darker time like the end of sunset or blue hour, and then using a small aperture like f/16, and then you can use a longer shutter speed. But it's important that you're going to need a tripod, and if you do want to do this in the middle of the day, you're going to need neutral density filters, which will block out excess light. Another important thing to note is that when you do have a shutter speed that's longer than 2 seconds, you're going to need to account for reciprocity failure, which is where the light energy isn't strong enough to create a proper exposure on the film itself. I have an article linked below that explains reciprocity failure and how you can do a simple calculation to get a perfectly exposed image every time. And tip number 5 is to choose the right film for your situation. My personal favorite all-around go-to film stock is HP5, and that's because it has such a wide exposure latitude. It's like shooting in RAW format where other films feel like shooting in JPEG. So you have so much extra detail in the shadows to work with as well as in the highlights, because it's a classic grained film that has really good tonality, even when compared to favorites like Tri-X. But HP5 is not the perfect film for every situation. It tends to make images that look kind of flat right off the start. You're gonna have to do some editing in order to make it really stand out. So if you do want to have a more contrasty image, you're gonna wanna use something like Japan Camera Hunter Street Pan 400 or Tri-X. But then there are other cases where it's better to use different film stocks. Like say for example, you wanna make a really classic looking image with large grains, then you're going to want to use Delta 3200. And you can take that film down to ISO 800 so that it's really good for landscapes or in the middle of the day, and still get really good images with a high grain profile. And that's because it's actually rated at ISO 1000. You can learn more about that in the description below, where I have an article that's just on Delta 3200. And then if you are shooting in something that's a hazy environment or a foggy environment, then perhaps you want something like Japan Camera Hunter again, or even Rollei Retro 400S, or other films like Ilford SFX 200. These are all films that have extended infrared sensitivity so that they can cut through that haze and fog like no other film on the market. So we're lucky to live in a time where there is still so much variety when it comes to black and white film. It still feels like there's new stocks that are coming out all the time, and that is awesome. That is amazing for all of us film photographers. So my advice to you would be to go out and try different film stocks when you get the chance, and see how they work for your workflow. There's going to be a stock out there that you really love as much as I love HP5. There's no substitute for going out there and trying different film. Okay, and those are my top 5 tips for taking better black and white photos. If you want to learn more, you check out the link in the description where I have an article that goes into all these tips and more. There's more details in the blog post than I can ever have in a simple video like this. And if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out and it's helping grow this channel super fast, which is amazing. Okay, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.